Clara Whitmore struck that match with a steadiness that surprised even her. Her fingers did not shake. Her breath did not catch. She had rehearsed this moment for 3 days on the train ride out to Pennsylvania, turning it over in her mind the way a person turns over a stone looking for the smooth side, and now that it was finally happening, she found she was calmer than she had any right to be. The letter caught fast, the way old paper does, curling black at the edges before the flame ever touched the center, and Clara held it out at arm's length so the ash would not touch her sleeve. Her Aunt Vera stood 3 feet away with her gloved hands folded in front of her, watching the fire eat through the words that had ended one version of Clara's life and begun another. Vera said her name once, sharp, the way you'd correct a child reaching toward a stove. Clara did not look up. She let the last corner burn down to nothing and opened her fingers, and the ash scattered across the platform boards and disappeared into the gaps between them, the way things do out here when nobody's watching to see where they land. "I heard you the first time," Clara said, and her voice did not waver either. "You cannot keep me. I understand that now. I am leaving, and I am not asking your permission to do it. Do not follow me onto the platform, Aunt Vera. This is the last thing I will ever ask of you, and I am asking it plainly." She picked up her suitcase, and it was heavier than it should have been for a girl carrying so little, heavy with the weight of everything she was choosing not to bring with her, and she walked toward the platform's edge without turning around, not once, not even when she heard her aunt say her name again, softer this time, almost uncertain, as if Vera herself did not know anymore whether she was calling Clara back or simply letting her go. The train whistle sounded somewhere down the line, a long low note carried on cold air, and Clara Whitmore stood at the edge of the platform with her back to the only family she had left in the world and did not feel the grief she expected to feel. She felt something closer to relief, and beneath the relief, something colder and more frightening, because relief was easy to understand, but this other thing, this quiet certainty that she had just stepped off the edge of everything familiar into territory she could not see the bottom of, that was harder to sit with. What was she walking toward? A man she had never met, a name on a piece of paper, a promise made by strangers in a language of arrangement and necessity that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with survival. She did not know yet what waited for her at the end of that long westward line, in a territory where the sky did not end and the rules she'd grown up with did not seem to apply. She only knew that whatever it was, it could not possibly be worse than staying. She was wrong about that, though not in the way she feared. She was wrong in the best and most terrifying way a person can be wrong, and she would not understand just how wrong for many months yet. The wagon rocked gently beneath them as Elias Rowan spoke, and Clara found herself listening not just to his words but to the particular way he chose them, slowly, like a man setting stones across a creek and testing each one's weight before he put his foot on it. He was not what 4 days of imagining had prepared her for. She had built him, in her mind, out of every hard man she had ever known, every uncle and merchant and stranger who had made her feel like a burden to be managed rather than a person to be considered, and Elias Rowan matched none of that construction. He was tall in the quiet way, his coat the color of old pine bark, his hands rough from work he had never had the luxury of resenting. And when he finally spoke plainly to her, out there on the open road with the gold dust of late afternoon settling over the horses, he said the kind of thing Clara had never once heard a man say to her before. "I placed that advertisement because the ranch needs managing, and I am better with cattle than with a household," he told her, "and that is the honest reason, plain and simple, but there is something else I think needs saying before we arrive, and I would rather say it now, out here, than let it sit unspoken between us in that house." He kept his eyes on the road as he said it, which Clara would later understand was its own kind of courtesy, giving her the privacy to react without an audience. "You came here because someone left you no better choice. I know that. I am not going to pretend otherwise, because there is a difference between a man who dresses up a hard situation to make himself feel better about it, and a man who simply looks at the truth and names it. The room you will have at the house has a lock on the inside, and that lock is yours, not mine. I will not come to that door without knocking, and I will not come through it at all unless you open it yourself. And if you get out there and decide within a week, or a month, that this life is not the one you want, I will put you on the train back myself, and I will not hold it against you, and I will not make you feel small for choosing it. Clara sat with that for a long moment, watching a hawk circle slow and lazy over a distant ridge, feeling something loosen in her chest that had been wound tight since the morning her aunt first mentioned the arrangement. "Why are you telling me all this?" she finally asked, and Elias thought about the question longer than she expected, his jaw working slightly as he turned it over. "Because someone should have told you something like it a long time ago," he said, "and didn't." Clara turned her face toward the open country so he would not see what that answer did to her, and pressed her lips together, and made herself a promise she had already broken once on this journey and intended to keep for the rest of it. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of a stranger who had just handed her more honesty in one wagon ride than she had received from her own family in 3 years. But honesty, she was about to learn, was only the beginning of what waited for her at that ranch, and not everyone under that roof would be so easy to read. Supper that first night told Clara more about the Rowan household than any conversation could have. Samuel's stew was dense and dark, rich with the particular care of someone who had learned to cook not as a chore but as an inheritance, and Clara ate every bite of it before she fully registered what she was doing, before she caught herself and realized she had eaten until she was satisfied rather than calculating, the way she had trained herself to calculate for 3 years in her aunt's house, exactly how much food a girl in her position was permitted to want. It was such a small thing, and it undid her more than the wagon ride had. She set her spoon down and sat with that feeling privately while Samuel cleared the pot from the stove, 16 years old and watchful in the particular way of someone who had learned early that trust was a thing you extended carefully, in small increments, and only after testing the ground beneath it. "You cook well," Clara said to him, and watched him turn from the stove with that same guarded look, searching her sentence for a trap that was not there. "The stew is very good," she said again, "and the biscuits too. You learned from someone." A pause stretched between them, the particular dignity of a boy deciding whether to let a stranger see something real. "My grandmother," he said finally. "Before she passed." "Mine taught me to bake bread," Clara answered. "Before." And something shifted in Samuel's face then, not warmth exactly, not yet, but the unmistakable recognition of a shared language, the specific and terrible fluency of people who have both stood at the edge of that particular word, before, and understood exactly what it costs to say it out loud. He did not say anything more. But when he returned to his seat at the table, he did not pull his chair quite as far away as he had when Clara first arrived, and Elias, watching this small exchange from across the room, said nothing at all, though something eased in his shoulders, some long-held tension finally letting go like a knot worked loose after years of pulling tight. Later, after Samuel had gone to the bunkhouse and the kitchen had been set right, Elias poured 2 cups of coffee without asking and placed one across from him, and Clara understood the gesture for exactly what it was. "Tell me about the ranch," she said. "Not the polite version. The real one." And when he told her, when he laid out the pasture counts and the fencing that needed doing and the accounts that were careful but never quite comfortable, Clara did something that made Elias Rowan stop talking entirely and simply look at her, because she rose from the table, found the account ledger on the shelf behind the stove, opened it between them, and asked him to show her exactly where the numbers sat. "You read ledgers," he said, and there was something in his voice that had not been there before, something that sounded almost like the first crack in a door that had been shut for a very long time. Clara only smiled slightly and turned a page, and told him, quite plainly, that he was being cheated by his lumber supplier, and by how much, and by whom. Elias Rowan sat back in his chair and looked at this girl he had known for less than 6 hours, this girl who had arrived with nothing but a suitcase and a Bible and a promise she'd made to herself never to cry again, and understood, with the particular clarity of a man who does not often admit such things even to himself, that the ranch was about to change in ways he had not remotely anticipated when he placed that advertisement. But whether that change would be the answer to everything he had been quietly praying for, or the beginning of something far more complicated than either of them could yet see, was a question the night was not ready to answer. If Clara Whitmore's story moved you, you already know there's so much more waiting on the road ahead of her. Hit subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter of her journey. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Elias Rowan can be trusted? Let me know where you're watching from tonight. See you in the next story.